GPB, winner of 11 Emmy Awards, including Station Excellence. Thank you for your support.
The 2012 Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series, brought to you from Georgia Public Broadcasting, the Republican race for the 7th Congressional District.
Good evening, I'm Josephine Bennett, Macon Bureau Chief for GPB Radio. We'd like to welcome our viewers, our listeners on GPB Radio, and our live studio audience to the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series, originating from the studios of Georgia Public Broadcasting. This is the debate between the Republican candidates in Georgia's 7th Congressional District. The 7th Congressional District comprises most of Gwinnett and Forsyth counties. Some of the largest cities are Cumming, Lawrenceville, and Sewanee. Now let's meet the candidates. They are, in alphabetical order, David Hancock, currently the COO of ACP, an Alpharetta-based software company where he handles company finances, contracts, and operations. Rob Woodall serves in the U.S. House of Representatives on behalf of the 7th Congressional District of Georgia. Here is the format for tonight's debate. In the first round, each candidate will answer 2 questions from our panel. In the second round, the candidates will ask a question of their opponent. Each candidate will have time for rebuttal in this round. And in the third round, the panelists will continue questioning the candidates. Finally, each candidate will have 30 seconds to make a closing statement. Before we get started, let's meet our 3 panelists selected by the Atlanta Press Club. First, we have Adrian Bernal, a freelance journalist in Atlanta. Next is Jim Burris, reporter and the host of Weekend Edition for WABE Radio in Atlanta. And our final panelist is Nanette Sosa. She is an award-winning reporter for All News 106.7 Radio in Atlanta. Now, let's get started with the debate. In the first round, each candidate will be asked 2 questions by our panel. The candidates will have 60 seconds to answer. As moderator, I will determine if a rebuttal is necessary. By random selection, Rob Woodall gets the first question from Adrian Bernal.
Congressman Woodall. After Georgia passed House Bill 87, a copycat law of Arizona's SB 1070, millions of pounds of watermelons, peaches, blackberries, cucumbers were left to rot in the fields. The Georgia Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association estimates that 391 million, or in another source, up to $1 billion have been lost. Has the lack of workers and the record drought and higher food prices made this a national security issue? And how do you propose we solve this problem?
Adrian, I'd tell you that immigration is a national security issue. It's a national security issue as it relates to illegal immigration, and it's a national security issue in terms of ensuring that the best and the brightest continue to want to come and use their big brains and bring their big ideas to America. The challenge we have in Washington, D.C. is we're involved in so many things that we have no business being involved in. Getting involved in those issues that should be state-based issues. Immigration, on the other hand, should be a federal issue. It's an issue that the executive, as the chief law enforcement officer of the nation, has to prosecute. And we have not had a president, not President Clinton, not President Bush, and not President Obama, who wanted to take our illegal immigration challenges seriously. If the fact that we can't get fruits and vegetables out of the field because we have been relying on that labor for far too long is any indication, we need to get started on this, and we need to get started immediately. Mitt Romney said he would get started immediately. I look forward to working with you on that.
Jim Burris, it's your turn to ask David Hancock a question.
Mr. Hancock, you challenged Congressman Woodall for, as you say, voting to provide funds to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the EPA, and the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and for voting to raise the debt ceiling. In fact, Mr. Woodall was one of a minority of Republicans who voted to do that. My question is, in an era where insiders and outsiders almost unanimously agree that there is gridlock in Washington due to partisanship, what role do you think compromise has in Congress?
I think compromise, as far as overspending, is something we're going to have to get away from. I think we've gotten to the point now where what we're going to have to do is we're going to have congressmen and legislators who are ready to come in and make decisions that have to be made. We've been spending more money than we take in. We're borrowing 43 cents of every dollar we spend. And the congressman knows that this is something we can't keep doing. as far as these agencies and stuff, there's a lot of nice things that it would be great for the government to do, but it's not constitutional. It's not something the government should be involved in. The government has grown and grown and grown over the years. And what we need to do is we need to have a group of representatives who can go there and just say, it's time to stop. It's time to put an end to spending. If we don't have an income problem, we have a spending problem. And that's what needs to be addressed. And yes, there are going to be some programs that are going to be cut that are not going to be popular, but it's what happens when you spend more money than you bring in. You have to make some hard decisions.
Congressman Woodall, a rebuttal?
I appreciate that. You know, the truth is I've been cited by the Club for Growth as one of the few congressmen in Washington, D.C. who's voted for every spending cut that has been offered in the amendment process. But at the end of the day, those amendments don't pass, and we're struck with that decision of, are we going to govern or are we going to say no? There are 24 Republican colleagues that I have that are much more liberal than I am. They can side with Nancy Pelosi's troops at any time and pass any bill that they want. It's not about compromise. It's about getting as much as we can get today, signing that into law.
Okay, Nanette Sosa, your question for Rob Woodall.
Hello. Fair tax. The proposed fair tax would be a tax on goods and services. That means illegal immigrants would pay just as much as everybody else. Would you support a social safety net for those who are most vulnerable, like undocumented workers?
Well, I would tell you that the social safety net that we have primarily is operated at the state and local level, and I would never presume to get involved in how state and local governments run their programs. But at the federal level, no, our job is not to provide a safety net for illegal immigrants. Our job is to let immigrants get in legally or to keep illegal immigrants from coming here at all. It's not to take care of those needs. We failed in that responsibility to secure our border, and we have failed in our responsibility to have a legal immigration system that works. I was told the story of Microsoft the other day. We can't get enough H-1B workers here, so Microsoft opened a facility in Vancouver, Canada, instead, because our legal system is broken just as the illegal system is broken.
And our final question in this round is Adrian Bernal's question for David Hancock.
Mr. Hancock, as I understand it, in Georgia, we are going to participate in the Real ID program. However, given that Georgia and particularly Atlanta uses many undocumented workers to fill low-paying jobs such as hotel maids, roofers, and agricultural workers, what do you suggest is the answer so that these jobs would pay enough to attract documented workers?
I think it's a capitalism question. It's a supply and demand question. One of the things that's not pointed out a lot about the illegal immigration issue is when we have people here who are willing to work for such a low wage, and especially employers who are able to take advantage of workers and pay them substandard wages without health care benefits, without a lot of things. Yes, that does allow them to sell something cheaper, but it also hurts the actual workers who are there doing the work. So I think once the employers are managed and the employers can be forced to obey the immigration laws and hire legal people, prices will adjust and wages will adjust accordingly. I believe that there are a lot of people out there who are willing to do work, but they're getting undercut by people who are not having to pay the fair wages. And I think if regular workers were able to compete with illegal workers on a equal footing, that would come up with a much better system and a lot more fair treatment of normal people.
That concludes round one. It is now time for our candidates to ask a question of their opponent. You have 30 seconds for the question, 60 seconds to respond, and 30 seconds for a rebuttal. By random selection, David Hancock asks the first question.
Congressman Woodall, I've been living and working and raising a family in Georgia in the 7th District actually for about 25 years. I started as a programmer and worked up to Chief Operating Officer of a software company that I helped to found. Not counting summer jobs, I was wondering if you have ever worked for a company in the state of Georgia.
I went to work shortly after school for my hometown congressman, who was Congressman John Linder at that time, serving this community. It's been something that not only am I not ashamed about, I'm proud of it. And I hope that folks who watch the kind of performance that I've turned in just 18 months, again, I'm worried not about the next election, I'm worried about returning the trust that folks invested in me in the last election. I've had a huge leg up in terms of pushing forward the priorities of our community because of my experience having served this community. It's been one of the great joys of my life to be of service to the 7th District. And if the voters are willing to trust me with their vote one more time, I'll be happy to serve for another 2 years.
David Hancock, your rebuttal.
I just know a lot of people are looking for someone with some private sector experience. So you have been a servant. You're definitely very accessible, but I think that the value that I've learned from working in the 7th District for so many years would be a big asset when I go to Washington.
Rob Woodall, you may now ask a question of your opponent.
David, we've talked a lot about budget issues. I serve on the Budget Committee, and one of the things I'm most proud of is being able to produce the Paul Ryan budget, get that not just out of committee, but passed by the floor of the House. My question to you is, are you as proud of the Paul Ryan budget as I am? Would you also support the Paul Ryan budget?
The Paul Ryan budget is a step in the right direction. It's definitely better than anything that's been presented by the administration. I think, though, it still has an over amount of spending in it. I really think that we're to the point where the spending is getting so critical that there are going to have to be some changes that are going to make some people hurt. And the Paul Ryan budget, like I say, it's a start, but it doesn't have the spending cuts that I would be happy to see.
I think that's true of so many folks in D.C., and the question isn't whether the Paul Ryan budget is perfect. The question is whether or not the Paul Ryan budget does take us that step in the right direction. I thought that it did, and so I was proud to cast my vote yes. And in doing so, that committed me to raising the debt ceiling going forward to implement that budget. But that is the single largest and most successful transformation of government in my lifetime, and I'd like to see excited about that as a step in the right direction, as opposed to having to reluctantly vote no.
Okay, that concludes our second round of questioning. For those who may be joining our program in progress, this is the debate between the Republican candidates in the primary election for Georgia's 7th Congressional District. For our third round, we return to our panel of journalists who will ask questions of the candidate of his or her choice. Candidates will be allowed 60 seconds to respond. As moderator, I will determine if the opposing candidate will be given 30 seconds for rebuttal. We begin this round with a question from Jim Burris.
This question is for Congressman Woodall. You say on your website, this is a quote, "My role in Congress is not to pass new laws, but to repeal old ones." What old laws have you helped repeal in your time in D.C., and what laws do you think you'll be successful in helping to repeal if reelected?
It's been a really neat time, Jim, to serve in Congress because I have a president that agrees with nothing that I believe in and a Senate that believes in nothing that I believe in. But through the appropriations process, that part of the budget that we're able to control in the U.S. House of Representatives, we've eliminated over 50 different individual programs. Is that enough? Absolutely not. Is that a significant step in the right direction with two branches of government that disagree with us? It is. We've also been effective at an individual regulatory level. There's a company right here in Gwinnett County had a problem with a federal regulation. It wasn't being implemented properly. We were able to move that forward, repeal that regulation, take that off the books, and I look forward to continuing to do that. I think that's an important role for your representative in this area.
And what law was that?
It was a law dealing with medical transport. They wanted to apply the same laws that apply to Delta pilots to folks who are transporting hearts for heart transplants. And we said, no, if you've already had 6 hours of flight time that day, rather than ground that heart that needs to get to that next destination, the public safety is best served by letting that heart fly on. It's a case of bureaucrats who don't have that real world experience. I didn't have that experience myself, but I'm listening to those folks in our community who do, and I've been effective at implementing their desires on Capitol Hill.
Our next question comes from Nanette Sosa.
Mr. Woodall, on the audit for the Federal Reserve Transparency Act, H.R. 459, I'm loosely quoting you here on, "It's time to hold the feds accountable for its actions." What is it that you would like to see from that? What type of accountability?
Well, the Fed in this case, Nanette, made decisions dealing with hundreds of billions of dollars without any consultation with the Fourth Estate, without any consultation with the legislature, and without any consultation with the executive branch. We have intentionally made the Federal Reserve and monetary policy outside of political influence, right? The only thing worse than the Federal Reserve managing monetary policy would be John Boehner and Nancy Pelosi managing monetary policy. So I'm glad that it has an element of independence, but it needs an element of accountability as well. We can't choose as a people whether or not we want to continue the Federal Reserve or abolish it without understanding what they're doing day to day, and this bill is going to ensure that they provide that information to all of us.
David Hancock, a rebuttal?
I'm all on board with that. The problem is the argument they give now is the Federal Reserve has just gotten too big to even audit, which is absolutely insane. We don't know what's there. We really don't know. And the fact that they're so reluctant to have any kind of oversight, any kind of audit trail, makes you wonder. Anytime somebody starts trying to hide something, it does make you wonder, is there something there that we should know about, and we would be have to try to find some way to fix.
Okay, Adrian Bernal, it's your turn to ask a question.
Congressman Woodall, you've said that you're looking forward to bringing back jobs to Georgia and to the country. The Obama administration is currently negotiating the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Pact, which is a copy of NAFTA, and which has been surrounded in secrecy. You know that it has an agreement that foreign corporations operating in the United States would be permitted to appeal key American legal or regulatory rulings to an international tribunal. That international tribunal would be granted the power to overrule American law and impose trade sanctions on the United States for failing to abide by its rulings. Are you in favor of the TPP like President Obama and Mitt Romney, or would you oppose it as an assault on American sovereignty?
Well, I would take issue with the way you've characterized it, Adrian. You know, what's so wonderful about this country is nothing trumps the United States Constitution. We have Constitution, we have treaties, we have federal laws, and the list keeps going on down. I can tell you there must be 4 different treaties that are on the Senate's desk right now that I get letters about every day with the American people saying, please don't pass this, please don't pass this. And they're not. We have letters saying that they won't. The question is, what kind of authority does it give to that appellate process? We have a trade surplus with every nation on the planet with which we have a free trade agreement. I support those free trade agreements, but none of those give anyone the right to trump federal law, nor would I support any promotion authority that gave anyone the right to trump federal law.
So you would be against this?
Well, again, I take issue with the way you've characterized it. I do not believe it trumps federal law as you have described it. That appellate panel that you have is absolutely a right to appeal, but it is not a right to dictate the new law of the land.
Jim Burris?
This question is for both candidates because you both advocate for smaller government, state control, and lower taxes. Here in Georgia on Tuesday, we're all going to vote on a transportation referendum that would pay for projects that neither the federal or state government can afford to do themselves. Here in Atlanta, if the T-Splosh passes, we'd pay a 9% sales tax in addition to a state income tax. Is this the type of local control that you advocate?
Mr. Hancock?
I'll go first. It's the type of local control, but this is not the way to do it. This bill was put together by legislators originally when they had it seemed like a good idea to give the program back and let the people decide what the programs they're going to spend money on. But it got out of control, and there were so many things that were added to this program that it's become now, if you look at what they're saying, Kasim Reed and some of these others, it's really a jobs bill. Transportation improvements are going to be very small compared to this. This is local government essentially run amok. This is the fact that we've got a group of people who put in every project they can with 25% of the money going back to the cities and municipalities to help get their support. There's a number of things in this, and no, this is not something that I think the people of Georgia are behind. It's not something that I'm behind by any means. I like the concept of local government, local support, but now the same legislators who passed the TIA, some of them are saying, no, this is not the project list that we envision. This is not something we should be backing.
Jim, this is exactly the kind of process we should have. I mean, I tell folks every day my job is to make the General Assembly the year-round responsibility, and my job the 3-month job in Washington, D.C. And if you're going to move more responsibility down, you're going to have to make tough decisions like this. I love the fact that rather than just raising my taxes, the General Assembly is giving me that choice. I'm able to go to the ballot box with all of my neighbors, and we're going to make that decision together. For too long, particularly in Washington, again, I've only been on the job there 18 months, but folks have said, I'm not going to raise your taxes, but I'm going to keep giving you all your benefits. That does not create a fiscally sustainable nation. At least in this case, what the General Assembly has told us is you can either pay the tax and we'll fund this list of projects, or you cannot pay the tax and we won't build those projects. At the end of the day, that choice is in the hands of the people, and that is always going to be the best place to put those choices.
Nanette Sosa?
I want to ask you about, Mr. Woodall, I'll start there, Obamacare. 3 sentences. What's your attitude on that? How do you feel about that?
The bad, destructive, and abdicating our responsibility to protect freedom. There is nothing good about that bill, and if there were, the same General Assembly that Jim just talked about could implement every single provision of it. This is stealing the responsibility from us back home and transferring that to Washington. I'm opposed to it at every level.
Mr. Hancock, a rebuttal.
Not much of a rebuttal. Here's something that we do agree with. This is another case of government run amok. When I was with picking an insurance program for my company, we picked a health savings account. So that's one of the idea of a health savings account is you've got a much higher deductible on your insurance policy, and then money goes into an account that you spend to cover the deductible. The beautiful thing about that is it puts the consumer in charge. And so in that case, you're actually trying to save money. If you can get a cheaper medication by going to a different pharmacy, you're going to do that. So I'm with him on repealing this and putting it back at the local level.
Adrian Bernal.
Yes, Mr. Hancock. The negative impact of burning coal as fuel is well documented. It produces 1/3 of our carbon dioxide, which is a major component of global warming, 40% of mercury, which is highly toxic, 1/4% of nitrogen oxide, and 2/3 of sulfur. Sulfur dioxide being found to promote heart disease, asthma, while nitrogen oxide destroys lung tissue. What would you do to encourage a transition to so-called green fuels?
I think the transition to green fuels is going to have to be done in a free market type system. If there's a better idea that can produce the same energy, then it's going to be taken. My understanding is coal has been cleaned up a lot as far as burning, but there's a lot of natural gas. There's a lot of private sector exploration into ways to produce energy. I would maybe take issue with the global warming thing. I'm not sure how much that contributes to it, especially now when you look at how much cleaner the atmosphere and everything is now than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. In industrial countries, where industrial countries have been able, where free enterprise has been able to promote clean resources and people get excited about their community and they clean it up, and the capitalism produces a much cleaner environment. Yes?
But what is our responsibility to protect our citizens from these
I think the EPA has gotten too far. The EPA was designed to produce some of these protections. I think they've actually gone way too far as a regulation. I don't think that we need as much regulation and oversight as we've got right now from the federal government. I would like to eliminate some of that regulation. I think that, like I say, I believe if you look into it, the coal industry has gotten much cleaner than it was.
I'm sorry, we've got to call time on that. Jim Burris, a question from you.
This is for Congressman Woodall. Georgia continues to lead the nation in bank failures, I believe for the third year in a row. Are banking regulations strict enough, or should they be strengthened?
The truth is, it's federal regulations that are causing so many of those failures, Jim. They're not preventing those failures. Had we been able to offer some flexibility in mark-to-market, these banks would have been able to come back after this unusual dip. If we'd given the money to the banks to recapitalize that we're losing by selling these banks, when we close them, those banks would have been able to recapitalize. This is absolutely a circumstance of the federal government creating the problem, not solving the problem. I know a lot of folks have said Dodd-Frank would be on their first list of things to repeal if they become president. I hope it's on Mitt Romney's list, and I'll be happy to cast a yes vote for that.
Just a point of clarification, to see if you agree. My understanding is the FDIC, the Deposit Insurance Corporation, which is funded by banks, is actually paying for this, and it's not taxpayer money.
They're funded by banks who get that money from us, the taxpayer. They don't have any place to get the money except for their consumers and their shareholders, who are always you and me. We're looking at FDIC insolvency coming down the road. They're having to raise those fees. But more importantly is the impact on our communities, Jim. It is destroying these communities when they close these banks. We could have helped them to survive. Instead, we chose to sell them off. Small banks are the victims. Big banks are the winners. I don't think that's what any of us want.
We've got to move on. We have no more time for questions. Each of the Republican candidates in the primary for Georgia's 7th Congressional District will now have 30 seconds for a closing statement. Rob Woodall was randomly selected to make the first statement.
Thanks so much, and thank you to the Atlanta Press Club for putting on this event. I think it's tremendously important. I'm pleased to be here and have been able to be a part of it. 18 months I've been on the job as a congressman for the 7th District of Georgia, part of this great freshman class in Washington, D.C. We've been able to do an amazing amount with a president that's against us and a Senate that's against us. I know better days are ahead. I've always said I would not be focused on the next election. I'd be focused on repaying the trust you put in me in the last election. I hope that I have. I thank you for that trust, and I hope you'll vote on Tuesday.
Our final closing statement comes from David Hancock.
I'd like to thank not only obviously the press club, but also the viewers who sat through 30 minutes of a congressional debate. So that's pretty exciting. I'm seeing all over the country, I'm seeing all over my district, people who are excited and interested now in the election, excited and interested in politics. And that's what I'm asking for. I'm asking for people who will take the time to go back and research the candidates, find out how I want to reduce the size and scope of federal government, find out how I want to reduce spending and cut it right now, not over a period of 10 years, find out how I want to make each branch of government stay within the confines of the Constitution. So I'd love to have people who investigate more and more.
Okay, that concludes our debate. We'd like to remind voters that the primary elections will be held on Tuesday, July 31st. Our thanks to the candidates and to our panel of journalists. We'd also like to thank the Atlanta Press Club for arranging today's debate. For more information about the Atlanta Press Club, you may visit atlantapressclub.org. The debates that air on Georgia Public Broadcasting will be archived on the Press Club's website. This broadcast has been streamed and will be available on demand on GPB's website, gpb.org. I'm Josephine Bennett. Thanks for joining us for the Atlanta Press Club Loudermilk Young Debate Series. Stay with GPB for more debates coming up next.
Become a better voter. Debates continue next with the Republican race for the 11th Congressional District on GPB.
This is a GPB original production.